Hello everyone and welcome to another Create With Me video. In today's video I'm going to be showing you how I made some scrub caps and face masks to make today's craft a bit of a challenge, which is kind of becoming the norm for me unfortunately. I'm trying to use up the fabric left over from the other scrub caps and masks that I made for my colleagues. So I need to have a look through my stash and see if I've got the fabric I need to be able to make the scrub cap and mask today. When I bought the fabric to do the original project, I made about 10 pairs of hats and masks. So I bought a lot of fabric in those little sets of matching fabrics. They're all different patterns, but they have the same color scheme or the same little motif appears in the different patterns. I don't even know what you call them. If I can find a name, I'll pop it up next to me here. I have a few different fabrics that I can use. I have this gorgeous teddy bear print, which has these little bears, feathers and arrows throughout the pattern. I only have this much left, but it's so cute that I really want to be able to use it. We'll see if I can find a way. I have some of this arrow fabric. I think I'll use this to tie the cap at the back of the head. I have quite a lot of this black scalloped stripe, which I think I will use to make the face mask, so it's all matching. And I have this piece which has the same feathers that are on that bear print. Now that I've figured out which fabric I'm going to use for which part of the project, I'm going to chop all the pieces up that I'll need and touch base again when it's ready to be pinned. So I have my pieces cut out. Starting with the face mask, I have two pieces 51 centimeters by 4 centimeters. I have two pieces that are 46 centimeters by 4 centimeters. They're going to form the ties of the mask. The longer ones will tie up behind the back of the head and the shorter ones tie up behind the neck. Hence why one doesn't need to be as long. Then I have two pieces that will form the actual mask portion. These will be back to back. I probably forgot to mention this is cotton fabric. The face mask is going to be a double layer of cotton. For the cap, I'm actually going to be combining 3 different patterns which all go together, so I think it's going to look quite cute in the end. I have 2 rectangle pieces which are 30 centimeters by 6 centimeters. They're going to be the ties for the cap. I'm making them a bit chunkier than the ties for the face mask, so when you're reaching behind your head trying to adjust something, you can feel which ones are definitely the cap ones. And I've got this piece which is 11 centimeters by, I can't remember, 11 centimeters by 48 centimeters. I plan to use this as the band portion of the cap, showing here so stylishly, and that's going to wrap around the head. It doesn't quite reach all the way around, but that's okay because even when I was using all matching fabric, I would actually insert a piece at the back which has a little arch cut out of it to allow for slightly different head sizes and different hair thicknesses. Depending on how much I need, once I've actually measured it all up and pinned it together, I will use some of this fabric where the ties get embedded, so that will be matching the ties. And then for the top of the cap, I'm using this cute little feather fabric, so that will be on top. This will be around, and then this will be the ties at the back. Can you see it? Anyway, now that I have all the pieces I need, I'm going to start pinning them together. Literally, I swear the neighbourhood can just hear when I press the record button. I've had a road sweep go past 3 times today. Missed a spot or something. Anyway, I have pinned together the first few pieces of the cap. I lined up the middle of the band piece with the front middle of the top piece, then worked my way around with the pins to follow that curve. The teddy bear piece wasn't big enough to do the full band. The arrow fabric, that is going to bridge the gap between where the teddy bear band ends on one side and ends on the other side. I've made it a little bit longer than this piece, and that's because this is going to hold the ties. So to sew the cap, I started by attaching the band piece with the back piece here and zigzag stitched the hem so it wouldn't fray. Along the top, I did 2 straight stitches all the way around following the curve, and again did a zigzag stitch. My next step will be to cut the curved shape out of this section and hem the edge, and then I can insert the ties, which I have here. Now that I've sewn the arch hem, I folded it over about 1/2 centimetre twice and then just did 1 stitch all the way around. Next, I'm going to place a stitch along the back piece to neaten up where the arch is sitting once it's folded out the right way, and also to get rid of the tiny bit of excess from where it follows the cap at the top. The back piece is now sewn all together. Again, I did 2 straight stitches and 1 zigzag stitch on the hem. When you flip it out the right way, that's what it's going to look like. To finish off the cap, the bottom edge is going to be folded on itself just under 1 centimetre, and then fold it again and I'm going to stitch that in place. Where it meets the back piece, I left extra fabric here to put the ties inside. I place it like this. I'll fold the edge of this section over the tie and then fold it over again, and that's going to bring it in line with where this piece will sit once it's pinned and sewn as well. And we're going to do that step all together. Oh, they're going to face that way obviously. So it's going to look something like this. So I've pinned the edge, and the next step is to just sew it. I'm going to do 2 top stitches, probably really close to the edge and then really close to where it's folded over. A little bit different down here where the ties are. I'm going to stitch around this rectangle shape to make sure that the ties are really strong in there. And the scrub cap is done. I'm going to work on the mask tomorrow and then I will show you what they look like together. Good morning. Welcome to day 2. Yesterday I cut up all the pieces I needed already, and we've already talked about them, so I won't repeat myself too much hopefully. The brief plan for today is to chop the wire out of this face mask and then pin and sew all of the pieces together. So the first few steps are done. I've sewn a little pocket up here for the wire to sit inside, and I've done all that on the side that will be against your face, so it's not seen on the outer surface. I then sewed along the bottom. I did 1 straight stitch, cut off the excess, and then a zigzag stitch to reduce any fraying. The next step is to flip it the right way round. And now I'm going to pin the top and bottom to make them more flat before I concertina the sides. The face mask has now been pinned across the top, across the bottom, and I've concertinaed the sides about 5 centimeters down, folded that back up on itself by about 1 centimeter and pinned it, and then repeated the same going down a bit further. It doesn't really matter if each section is not exactly the same. The part that does matter is that each side is symmetrical, because if one side ends up being more bunched up than the other, then your face mask will end up being lopsided. I'm going to do a top stitch all the way around the edge, When I go along the top, I'm going to be as close to the edge as possible. Same again on the bottom, but the sides I'm going to come in about 1 centimetre. Because the fabric is fraying quite a bit along these edges, I'm just going to quickly do a zigzag stitch along both sides. The face part of the mask is now ready to go. You can see with the folds that I've added, there's room for the face mask to move. The metal piece is in the nose, so we can get that lovely bridge shape. And now it's time to do the ties. The longer ties, which are going to go at the top of the mask to go behind the head, I'm going to make those in the classic tube style where you fold it back on yourself, put a straight stitch in, and then using a safety pin, wiggle it back out to be the right way around. The difference with the ties that go behind the neck is they're going to actually be folded around the edge of the face mask so that it covers up where the top tie is, but also creates a nice smooth edge before the tie begins to go behind the neck. I'll do this part close up because it's very fiddly and can quite easily go askew, but we will endeavour to get it right. It would really help if I had an iron, but unfortunately we don't have one where we're living. We're kind of refusing to get an iron because it would just be one more thing for us to pack the next time we move. So we get by with lots of pressing and the warmth of my fingertips to help make the fabric sit where I want it to, and lots of pins. Something I wanted to talk about in this video, just to have a little bit of a industry relevant discussion, is the variation in standards within the veterinary industry. As a new nurse, I trained in 2019 and I was lucky enough to receive gold standard training. Gold standard means always offering the best treatment possible and treating animals with the respect they deserve. I was so excited to be trained to such a high level of professionalism and medical care. When I started in the industry, my clinic was run by a vet nurse who had the same standards. But at clinics I worked at later, they didn't uphold the same values in animal care. And while there's always something to learn from your colleagues, I found it really hard when I disagreed with some of the corners that were cut. And the thing I wanted to talk about today, which is relevant to what I'm creating, is the lack of standardization across the industry when it comes to aseptic technique, which is reducing chance of infection during surgery and other treatments. Not only to protect staff from potential harm depending on the procedure, but also to just prevent unnecessary bacteria exposure for the patient who is undergoing surgery. I became quite disillusioned with the veterinary industry because of the lack of standards that very easily could have been prioritised. I'd love to get back into vet nursing in some capacity in the future, but only if gold standard is upheld, regardless of the time available or the resources at hand or the particular values of the vet or nurse who's in charge. So I haven't given up yet, I'm just waiting. With all that being said, the veterinary industry is always improving, from new research to training and time, and just professionals being open-minded about changes in practice when new information is provided. But it's people who aren't open to that new information and refuse to make changes who hold the industry back. So here's to making positive changes within the veterinary industry. Waste is a major issue in both human and animal medical industries. So we should all be making decisions wherever possible to reduce the impact we have on the environment, including fashionable and reusable surgical caps and masks, rather than the single-use disposable, non-biodegradable ones that are currently standard within the industry. Now that I've flipped the tie the right way around, this is the point where you would use an iron if you had one, but I've gone along and pressed it down as flat as possible and pinned it, and I'm now going to do a top stitch all the way along both edges to hold it in place. Both of the ties that go at the top of the mask are ready. I'm going to start the ties where the first fold sits. So the bottom ties have been pinned. It was very fiddly work. This is the hardest part of the whole thing. So each tie was folded over the sides. I did cut a little bit, otherwise this part had to stretch too far and it wasn't quite going to reach to cover it all up. Now I'm going to do a top stitch that follows the edges and comes back up again on both sides, and then it's ready to put them together. All done. A few things didn't quite go to plan. I actually changed my mind about the fabric for the face mask. I originally said I wanted to do all of it this black, but once I got started I realized that there wouldn't be anything matching the cap. So I used some of the feather fabric, which is the same as the one that's on top, and then just used the black for the straps. When I made the original masks, they were actually concertinaed a little bit more than I've done them this time. Previously, I brought them down to about 8 centimeters here once they were folded. These ones are 10 centimeters, so they ended up being a bit long on the face. They still sealed all the way around the edges, but it just kind of looked a little bit too bulky. And the other issue I had, I knew this was going to be a problem. This band piece was a lot shallower. It was only 11 centimeters in width. The caps I made before, they were 14 centimeters deep. So the problem I've run into is that if I want it to sit right at the front here, then it doesn't sit low enough at the back to cover all of my hair. Not so much a problem if you have either a smaller head or less hair than I do, but this one doesn't quite fit me and I would not wear this into surgery, unfortunately. But I do have a little project in mind that I can use this cap for, so stay tuned for that one. I think they look really cute together and I hope you enjoyed following the process. Throughout every industry, there are always going to be standards that are cut. Let's all be ambassadors for gold standard to make the world a better place. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like a video to feed the creator for a day, subscribe to support them forever. Until next time, stay gold.
And action.
You need to be deathly quiet. You're messing me up. Where was I? I got lettuce in my teeth. Love you.
That was entirely your interaction. Cannot believe me for it.
Small sip. Small slip. So a small piece of paper. Piece of paper.
And cut.